Home sales around America have collapsed to the lowest level of 10 years, according to the National Association of Realtors. Check this out, everyone. National Association of Realtors just reported that home sales retreated 5.9% in July. And get this, everyone, that's down 20% from 1 year ago. And not only that, everyone, the NAR reported that while home prices are still up 10% year over year, they went down by $10,000 in July. So this is big news. Not only are we seeing collapsing home sales, which is a big problem for realtors, it's a big problem for the US housing market, we are now seeing home sale prices go down nationally, not just in a handful of markets, which I've talked about on this video, but we're seeing sale prices go down month over month across America. And this is a huge sign that the housing crash in America is progressing, and it is progressing fast, because everyone, you got to understand what this declining home sale environment really means. Let me show you some historical data. We're looking at over 20 years of data on home sales in America, data from the National Association of Realtors. And what you see here is that the seasonally adjusted annual home sale figure was 4.8 million in July 2022. Well, is that good? Is that bad? Well, you can see that's actually pretty bad. That's one of the lowest levels in a decade. So what that means is buyers, as I've said many times on this channel, buyers are out of the housing market. Home sales have crashed tremendously in the last 6 to 7 months. What I think is interesting, though, and what I want you all to pay attention to, if you're trying to figure out what's going to happen in this housing market into the future, pay attention to what happened to home sales back in the mid-2000s, right? At the peak of the last housing bubble, particularly December 06, home sales were 6.4 million. And then in the span of a year, they crashed down to 4.4 million in late 07. This is very similar to what's going on today in 2022. So you see the parallel, how now in the summer of 2022, we're almost in the same situation we were at the end of 2007, kind of right before that last housing bubble turned into a major crash. And so folks, that's why I believe we are just getting started on these home price declines, because the fact that home sales have gone down by so much, and the realtors are freaking out about this, because realtors make their money off the home sale. Every time a home is sold, the realtor gets the commission, 2.5%, 3%. Well, we have a huge collapse in home sales, and that's historically a sign of declining home prices. And to solidify this in your guys' mind, I want to show you a specific example in a specific city that the housing crash is raging right now, and both sales and prices are going down. So you can understand what this looks like, what a housing crash looks like in this market, and how it's going to apply to your city over the next 3 to 6 months. Take a look at this, everyone. I'm going to show you data from Redfin, and here we're looking at Las Vegas. We're looking at the Las Vegas housing market in terms of understanding the yellow line, how inventory is increasing. You can see inventory in Vegas has gone up all the way to nearly 12,000 homes on the market. It's doubled in just a couple months, and this is basically an inventory level that's almost at the same level it was in 2019 before the pandemic. So Vegas, huge surge in inventory. But what you got to pay attention to is the surge in inventory relative to the decline in home sales. That's the blue line. Home sales in Vegas are declining as inventory is going up. And when you combine these two metrics, you get something called the months of supply on the market. So in Vegas right now, the months of supply, there's 4.7 months of inventory for the existing level of home sales. And this is a metric I'm going to be talking about with different cities in this video, and important that you understand this metric for your city, because you can see in Vegas, the months of supply has absolutely exploded to 4.7, which is now higher than it was in 2019. Again, meaning, folks, that the inventory has surged a lot, just as the home sales are collapsing, meaning that the sellers in the Vegas housing market are having to get increasingly desperate in order to offload their home. And if the seller is having to get increasingly desperate in this type of market, what are they going to do? Well, of course, they are going to cut the price. And that's exactly what sellers are doing in Vegas. If we overlay this yellow line, which is the median sale price for homes in Vegas, what do you notice? We're down to $422,000 sale price in August. That's down just by about like 6 or 7% in only 2 months. And you can see it's completely related to the fact that the months of supply on the market has surged upwards. So, I think, folks, there's a lot of people in the housing market and economy right now who aren't like aware of this, I don't think. They don't know that home prices are going down month over month across America. They don't know that this housing crash is occurring. I see it in the comments section, of my last couple of videos. A lot of people don't think there's a housing crash, and the data I just showed you on Vegas shows you very clearly there is. Inventory is surging, home prices are crashing, particularly in certain parts of America, everyone, and this is where it gets very interesting. On this map, we're looking at how much sale prices in the US housing market have declined over the last 2 or 3 months. 3 months, I think it is, from May to August. And the metros in orange have declining sale prices. And in particular, I want to zoom in here on this little pocket in the Southwest. Look at this little pocket here in the Southwest where, we just talked about Vegas. Prices are down 6%. According to Redfin, the sale price in Vegas is down 6% in the last 3 months. And if we look all here in the Southwest, this whole area is in orange. Riverside, California, the price is down by 5%. San Diego, the price is down by 6%. Phoenix, the price is down by 4%. Take a look at Anaheim, California. The price is down by 8% in Anaheim. So we basically have an entire block of the country here in the Southwest of the Pacific where, the sales have collapsed the most in these markets. And as a result, the months of supply is surging. Sellers are getting desperate and they're having to cut the price. And in real time, we're seeing big price declines. And, a comparison now that I want to draw for a lot of you is to actually zoom out a little bit, zoom out from just looking at America and looking at certain cities in America, which I'm going to talk more about later in this video. I'm actually going to take your request to look at this data on home sales and, home sale prices for all the different cities in America so you can understand what's going on in your housing market, how big the crash is going to be. But I want to zoom out and just talk about the global housing market for a second, because it's important to understand the global perspective here, that it's not just America that's in a housing crash right now. Basically, the entire world is at the start of a housing crash, and this, in fact, is the only, I think it's the third time in world history where we're entering a global housing crash. And let me tell you, the first 2 times, they were really bad. It wasn't good. And let me just talk about some other countries here which are going through this, everyone. Like, if we look at China, I think a lot of you have heard about China. Right? China's issues in their banking sector, China's issues in their real estate sector. Well, what's going on? Well, China home prices now have fallen for 11 months in a row. They're having a mortgage crisis in China where, there's mortgage boycotts. They don't have any buyers. Prices are going down. There's vacant homes everywhere. So, China is having a housing crash, just as Vegas is having a housing crash. Completely different parts of the world, completely different cultures, but they're both experiencing a housing downturn. The same in a country like New Zealand here, where we can see the head of the Bank of New Zealand, according to Bloomberg, he warned everyone in New Zealand, get this everyone, that home prices will keep falling in New Zealand. The head of the Bank of New Zealand said this, and in fact he said, expect home prices to continue dropping until September 2023, so at least one more year of home price declines in New Zealand. Now, 85% of my viewers live in America, according to the YouTube analytics. So I think maybe some of you are thinking, well, why do I care what's going on in New Zealand and China? The reason you should care is because there is a globally synchronized housing crash occurring right before our eyes. Like if you look in any of these countries, they're saying the same exact thing. Home sales are collapsing, home prices are collapsing. So if this is happening across the world, this just isn't some fluke, everyone. This is clearly a result of there being a debt bubble and an asset bubble across the world that now central banks worldwide, not just the Fed, central banks across the world are now hiking interest rates into this asset bubble and doing, in my opinion, a controlled demolition on the world economy and housing market. So in case you think this is just some little dip that America's housing market is experiencing, it's not, everyone. This is a worldwide housing crash. And so I'm going to talk actually more about this in future videos. Make sure to leave a like or a comment if you want to hear about this global perspective. But now let's get back into specific cities and specific housing markets in America that I know you're all interested in hearing about. So let's go back to checking out this map. Where are home prices declining in America, everyone? We know they're declining in New Zealand and China. Where are they declining in America? So it's the areas in orange. We talked about the Southwest. We talked about this area here, but interestingly, we can see actually in Miami, in Southeast Florida, home prices are now starting to go down. Redfin's reporting a 4% decline in home sale price, median sale price in the Miami, Florida metro area. And you can see this is actually kind of interesting because if we look at Miami here, we can see the median price has gone from $491 all the way down to $469. So that's a 4% decline. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, look how much it went up. And good point. Prices still need to go down by a lot to entice buyers back into the market. But what I think is interesting about Miami and some of the other cities that we're going to talk about is look at the months of supply in Miami. It's gone up from about 2.6 all the way to 5.1. So there's more inventory and fewer home sales. But this months of supply in Miami is still below what it was in 2019 by quite a bit. So what this shows in Miami is that we don't necessarily need inventory to get back to 2018 or 2019 levels to see prices go down. The fact that interest rates are surging so fast and the US is heading into a recession is enough now to induce home sellers to have to cut the price even in a lower inventory environment in certain housing markets like in Florida. And this is kind of the thing that shocked me. I wasn't expecting Miami sale prices to already be going down by 4%. Now, someone who's more bullish on the housing market might, say to me, Nick, I see, your argument, but maybe this could be seasonal. I know some people are already thinking that this could just be a seasonal downturn in sale prices. And there's certainly some seasonality here. We're in the part of the year in the housing market where sellers cut the prices. But I think everyone, you need the long view on what's going on right now in the US economy, right? Like we're in the beginning stages of a recession. The yield curve's inverted. Consumer sentiment's at an all-time low. Layoffs are surging. The housing market's in a recession according to multiple sources, not just my own. So, this is going to get worse going forward, everyone, not to mention the backlog of foreclosures. So, these initial price cuts and declines in sale price are a sign of things to come in the housing market going forward, everyone. So, at this point, I have a couple more things to talk about in this video, but let's get some questions and some requests here from my channel members. What do you guys want me to cover here? All right, here we got a question actually from Argonaut. This is a good one. I'm hearing many housing analysts flip and say there's a housing crash coming, but not for the Midwest and Chicago. Are they right? Well, that's a great question, Argonaut. This is something I've actually been saying now for better part of 6 to 9 months, is that a market like Chicago, you could see the sale prices are down by 2%. So they're coming down clearly in Chicago and some other parts of the Midwest, but I don't think Chicago is going to experience like a big housing crash, because you can see that median sale price there of $320,000 is still relatively affordable. So I think we're going to have a correction in a housing market like Chicago, but I don't think we're necessarily going to have a crash. And interestingly, you can see if we go around the Midwest, like prices are still going up in some parts of the Midwest. In Indianapolis, the median sale price is up 3.5%. If we go to Peoria, Illinois, the price is up 7%. Pittsburgh prices are up slightly. Cleveland prices are up 8%. I think there's some seasonality in there. But what this makes clear, everyone, is that the Northeast and the Midwest housing markets, this trend is still occurring where they are still much, I don't know if healthier is the right word, but they are still tight. Inventory is still low in the Midwest and the Northeast. So let's get another question. Let's get another request. Ethan asked me, do I prefer Dallas to Austin, holding out for someone in that area? That's a great question. So basically, I lived in Austin starting in August 2020, going to October of 2021. So for like 15 months, I was part of that crew that like moved to Austin when Joe Rogan and Elon Musk lived there. And then after that, I've lived in Dallas now for 9 months. And from like a livability perspective, I much prefer Dallas to Austin. It's not even close. And it's not really even ragging on Austin. It's just more like Dallas aligns with my personality. Austin's like, if you like drinking and hanging out with bachelorette parties, maybe go to Austin. But if you like, like growing your business, go to Dallas. It's kind of like the difference between those two cities. But as far as housing markets go, let's compare those housing markets. I think in a market like Austin, let's take a look at what's going on. So you can see the yellow line. Redfin's reporting the inventory in Austin now is up to 11,000 homes on the market. So Austin has now eclipsed its pre-pandemic inventory levels in 2019. So and it did that in literally like 4 months. Inventory tripled. The problem is not only that, but the home sales in Austin are now declining by quite a bit. So when we have surging inventory and declining home sales, it means the months of supply on the Austin housing market have now surged up to 4.5. 4.5 months of supply, which is now the highest it's been over the last 3 years, according to this Redfin data. So we're literally seeing something in the Austin housing market that we have not seen as far as how many homes are on the market and how few home sales there are. And before I get to Dallas and some of the other requests that you guys are going to have, I want to talk about what I think is occurring, actually, in terms of migration. I think there's a shift in migration that's occurring in the U.S. housing market and economy right now, where a lot of the cities that attracted people during the pandemic, whether it be like a Nashville or an Atlanta or a Tampa or an Austin or a Phoenix, they are not getting as many people moving into those cities anymore. And it's something that really hasn't shown up yet in the official U.S. Census migration data. But looking at this data on the housing market, it's suggesting to me there's been a big migration slowdown into the South. And this could be one reason, too, why the Northeast and the Midwest is still performing pretty well, right? We see the Northeast home prices are still up. If we go to a market like, a market like New York's really interesting, because New York's a very controversial housing market. Like in New York, the inventory is 29,000 homes on the market across the metro. That's less than it was before the pandemic. And if we take a look at the months of supply in New York, we can see 4.2, it's still pretty low. And as a result, home prices in New York haven't really dipped. And this is shocking, right? Because 6 to 9 months ago, New York was a city that everyone kind of, for lack of a better term, crapped all over. A lot of people were leaving New York. Its housing market was declining, but now it seems to have stabilized. And one thing I'm curious about is if this trend is going to hold of the Northeast, housing market being stable. I'm going to give you guys more thoughts on that in future videos. But before that, let's get into some more requests. What markets do you guys want me to cover in terms of going through here? Let's see, everyone. We got a request for Eastern Tennessee. So let's take a look at Eastern Tennessee, everyone. What's going on in Eastern Tennessee? And I guess that would be Knoxville, right? We can see the median sale price in Knoxville, according to Redfin's, up 1.3% over the last 3 months. Compared to Nashville, it's down. So Nashville's a market that's declining. Knoxville's a market that's still holding, as is Asheville, North Carolina. I think of these cities, Knoxville and Asheville, in tandem as they attract a lot of the same people. A heavy remote work crowd moves to these areas. So they're not in a crash yet, Eastern Tennessee or Western North Carolina. But I think they will be soon, because they're building so many homes in these locations that I think the inventory is going to spike into the future across much of Tennessee, in fact. All right, what other requests do we have? We got a request for Orlando, everyone. So let's move to Orlando, Florida. What's going on in Orlando? So we can see home prices there are flat. So prices in Orlando are flat over the last 3 months, according to Redfin, slightly down. And so you can see, a lot of Florida still in blue. Prices in Tampa are still up. Tallahassee's still up. Orlando's flat. And I think, it'd be interesting here. Let's take a look at the inventory situation in Orlando, because, this is an interesting thing to look at. So inventory has surged, the yellow line. Active listings up to almost 9,000. So we're almost back to 2019 inventory in Orlando, not quite. But then again, the inventory is surging as the home sales are going down. So it's key to understand that relationship, which means that the months of supply is now going up pretty rapidly to 2.4 homes months of supply. And you could see what happened during the pandemic was that got down to like 1.1. And that's how we had, all the crazy stuff going on in a market like Orlando during the pandemic, because there wasn't enough inventory. The months of supply was really low. Now it's trending back up, not to where it was before, but we're getting there. We're getting there, everyone. All right, what other requests do we have? How about we do Myrtle Beach? This is an interesting market. a market that is still tight. You can see months of supply is 4.1 in Myrtle Beach. We're not yet to the levels of like 5 to 7 that we were at before the pandemic, when actually Myrtle Beach's housing market, a little secret folks, in early 2020 wasn't doing so great. The pandemic kind of saved it. And if we look at prices in Myrtle Beach, we can see they are still going up over the last 3 months. And we have this cluster, if we zoom in here on the southeast, we have this cluster of blue where prices are still trending up in Augusta, Georgia, and Myrtle Beach, and Fayetteville, North Carolina. And one thing to understand is timing, everyone. The Southeast was later in the housing boom cycle. Like, the housing boom cycle started initially on the West Coast. It was like Salt Lake, Phoenix, Vegas, Austin actually started booming in late 2019 before the pandemic. Then it wasn't until like late 2020, early 2021 that the Southeast started to boom. So like the Southeast is about, I would say, 9 to 12 months behind Phoenix. So what I want you guys to think about, even if you don't live on the West Coast of America, I want you to think about like what's happening in Vegas and Phoenix and Boise right now. This will happen eventually in the Southeast. It's just going to take a bit more time to get there. So important that you understand holistically what the housing market is doing. But one thing I do actually want to talk about before getting into some more requests is, it's not all roses now for home buyers. Like, it's a good thing that the inventory is going up across America and the prices are going down. But interestingly now, sellers are starting to get cold feet in certain markets. So Redfin just came out with a report just a couple days ago that was super interesting. Take a look at this, everyone. Redfin reports housing market slowdown easing as new listings hamper supply. So what Redfin's saying here is that there's fewer homes now, fewer sellers coming to the market than compared to 2 months ago. And let me show you this on a graph so you can understand what Redfin's saying. So if we look at new listings, which is not inventory, this is like a seller coming to market with a house, down 14% year over year, actually, over the last couple weeks. So we have more sellers now who are basically getting cold feet. And I want you to imagine that this is now shaping up to be a battle between the buyer and the seller, where the buyer has won the battle the last 2 months. The buyer demand's dropped, the home sales are at a 10-year low, prices in America are going down. Now that's causing the sellers to be like, wait a minute. At first the sellers were freaking out. Now sellers in certain cities are starting to be like, maybe I should wait 3 months or 6 months or 9 months to list my home. So that's why we're starting to see a reduction in new listings to the market. Not enough to kind of curb the price cuts or inventory, but enough to slow the growth of inventory. And again, it's specific cities where this is occurring, as always. So if we take a look here, this is a different map than the one we were looking at before. We're tracking where are sellers, putting less homes on the market. And again, it's the same story, everyone. It's the Northeast. Like in Portland, Maine, there's been a 46% decline in sellers putting new listings on the market year over year in August, compared to a 10% decline in home sales. So Portland's actually going to have lower inventory in the next couple weeks and months because of this. And it's, again, very interesting that, in a place like Rochester, the listings are down 22%. In a place like Columbus, they're down 24%. Meanwhile, in a place like Phoenix, the listings are only down 8%, while the home sales are down 33%. So what's again important, guys, is to compare the new listings coming to the market against the home sales. So in Phoenix, new listings are down 8%, but home sales are down 33%, which means inventory is still going up. And in the areas in orange, by and large, inventory is still going up and prices are going down. But again, we have the situation Midwest and Northeast, like the housing market doesn't quite want to budge. In Boston, we can see the listings are down by 22%, which is more than what the home sales are down. So inventory in Boston has stagnated a bit. It's a very interesting trend. And I think ultimately these sellers are making a mistake, because some sellers now are thinking, here's what I think the sellers are thinking. You guys can tell me if I'm right or wrong, or if you're a seller, let me know in the comments what you're thinking. But I think the sellers are thinking, this is just a blip. Fed's going to cut rates in 4 months, and then it's going to be a better market to list in the winter and spring, is I think what a lot of sellers are thinking. And they're making a big gamble with that, because when they list, if they delay and they list in the winter and spring, they're going to be listing now alongside a foreclosure wave and a wave of newly constructed backlogged homes. And so these are the two variables that are inevitably going to make the inventory and new listing surge self-perpetuating over the next 6 months. Is that it's not just going to be like existing owners choosing to sell. It's going to be banks foreclosing on homes, and that's going to increase new listings. It's going to be home builders catching up on 1.7 million housing units under construction. That's going to increase listings. So this is the point that I think a lot of sellers who might be getting cold feet to list are missing right now, is that you're going to be competing with inventory that's going to be structural inventory over the next 6 months, and that's going to be difficult to compete with. All right, everyone. What other requests do we have? I have time for probably like 2 or 3 more requests in this video. So what markets do you want me to cover before I sign off, everyone? Let me actually take a request before that, or look at a comment here. McNolan says, I remember many comments on this channel from realtors in 2021 saying that housing will never go down. So this is a great comment, everyone. I just want everyone to have the proper frame of reference, right? Because like 6 months ago, everyone was saying inventory would never go up, prices would never go down. Well, now that's clearly happening, and it's almost like people have adjusted to that new normal. It's important to remember that, how fast this housing market has shifted, and that, a lot of the people now saying this is a blip were people 6 months ago saying inventory would never go up. And so there's been a lot of goalpost shifting going on among housing market bulls. So just be aware of that anytime you see anyone saying, buy today, or, the housing market isn't going to crash. Think of what was that person saying 6 months ago. All right, everyone, what do we got here? Let's get some requests. Prescott, Arizona. All right, Prescott, Arizona is an interesting one, everyone. Let's take a look at what's going on in Prescott. And I think you're probably going to want to see prices in Prescott. So let's zoom on over on my map here in Tableau. Some of you guys asked me how I put these maps together. So I take data from Redfin and Zillow, and then I import it into graphing software called Tableau. So let's see, where's Prescott? Here we go, Prescott Valley, Arizona. Sale prices are down 5.4% over the last 3 months. Continuing this trend that we're seeing across this entire location in the Southeast Pacific. So we have Phoenix down 4.2%, Prescott Valley down 5.4%, Lake Havasu City down 12%, which is wild. I think there might be some seasonality there in Lake Havasu City where this is a slow time of year, but still 12% in 2 months is a wild drop. And anytime you see like an entire region like this, guys, go down, whether it be Vegas or Riverside or San Diego or Phoenix, it's saying that there's a problem altogether in this location. There's not enough people, there's not enough home buyers, and this area is going to continue to decline over the next couple months, in my opinion. All right, what else do we got? What other requests do you guys want to see? How about Reno, Nevada? Tanya is requesting Reno, Nevada. So let's take a look at Reno. This is a great market. Actually, Reno is just funny because I always associate Reno with the show Reno 911. Not sure if you guys ever watched that show on Comedy Central. Hilarious. If not, you should. But we can see in Reno, the active listings have surged. I mean, they've doubled in 3 or 4 months, up to 2,100 homes on the market, which is almost at 2019 levels. And again, we have the situation where the inventory has surged, but the home sales have collapsed down to 529 home sales on the month. So what that means in Reno is that the months of supply has gone up to 4.1, which is now at or above the 2019 level. So Reno is back to what it was pre-pandemic, which means that prices in Reno are going down. Take a look at this, everyone. The median list price has gone from 586 all the way down to 539. So what is that? Is that like a 7% decline in home values in just 3 months in Reno, Nevada? This is a market that's crashing, folks. Reno is crashing. There's no question about it. What else do we got? How about Bakersfield, California? I'm going to do a quick rapid fire round, close things up here, doing like 4 or 5 requests, everyone. I've got some energy here. So Bakersfield, months of supply up to 2.7. Good improvement, almost to 2019 levels. Sale prices, though, they've gone down a bit in Bakersfield. But I think what's going to bring Bakersfield down and some of these Southern California or Central California markets is the foreclosures. Because there's a lot of bad loans in California in general, especially Central California. As these foreclosures unleash, a market like Bakersfield's going to get hit really hard. So again, folks, this improvement in inventory has occurred without foreclosures. So imagine what Bakersfield's going to look like going forward with foreclosures. What else have we got, everyone? Let's go to San Antonio. San Antonio, Texas. A city I considered moving to. Like when I was moving out of Austin, I said to myself, maybe I'll move to San Antonio. Visited a couple of times, decided not to. I think it's a little too small. Is a nice town though. You can see months of supply in San Antonio is up now to 2.9. Still below 2019 levels, but we're getting there. But that hasn't stopped sale prices from going down in San Antonio from 348 down to 332,000. So it's like a 3% decline in sale prices in San Antonio. So the market is softening, but San Antonio is not a situation like an Austin or a Phoenix. I have a request from Phoenix. Let's take a look at Phoenix, everyone. So months of supply in Phoenix is now up to 3.9. 21,000 listings to 5,400 home sales. That's above 2019 levels. So Phoenix is another market that has eclipsed what it was before the pandemic. Median sale price down to 462 from 487. So that's about a 4% decline in sale price over the last 2 months. Phoenix is a market that I think is going to continue to crash. And here's why, and I'm going to do a video on this soon, everyone. The rental market in Phoenix and some other cities is now going down. And this is like a phase 2 of the housing crash. Like phase 1 was surge in inventory, surge in price cuts, initial declines by 5%. Phase 2, which could include foreclosures, but it's also going to include evictions and rental markets declining. Like the market occupancy in Phoenix's rental market is now down to the lowest level in 5 years. Evictions are at a record high in Maricopa County. So this is a curveball. This is a variable for a market like Phoenix that could cause prices to go down way more, because if the rental market takes a dive, which I believe it will continue to do so, then that's going to be a big problem for many of the investors in a market like Phoenix or Vegas. And I'm going to cover this more in future weeks, everyone. But before that, let's just get a couple more requests before signing off here. Portland, Oregon. Let's do Portland, Oregon, everyone. And if you want to make a request, everyone, it's really easy. Hit the join button below, become a channel member. I'm going to do these live streams more frequently. I'm going to try to do them weekly or bi-weekly. So if you want to make requests during these live streams, hit the join button, become a channel member. We can see Portland months of supply is up to 2.2, according to this Redfin data, almost to 2019 levels. But we can see sales prices are now trending down. They went up from 576 down to 553. So what is that? That's like a 4.5% decline. And you can see Portland's interesting. It's like has not grown much over the last year. In another market that actually hasn't grown much, or actually has declined over the last year in home prices, at Oakland. Take a look at Oakland, everyone. The median price has declined now to $926,000, which is expensive. Like the Bay Area is still expensive, but you can see that's actually lower than it was a couple months ago. That's lower than it was a year ago in a market like Oakland. So the Bay Area is having some issues, whether we look in Oakland or whether we look in a market like San Jose, where we can see the prices have come down a lot over the last couple of months, and they're basically flat year over year. They're going to be down year over year soon in San Jose. All right, everyone, I have time for one more request. Let's do one more request. What market do you want me to cover before I sign off? Let's do Sacramento, California. Another Northern California market. This is one where the inventory is spiking. Take a look. Months of supply is now up to 2.7, which is in line with late 2019 levels. Prices are now down from a high of 612 in May all the way down to 580 in August. So Sacramento is another market where like year over year there's really no growth. Over the last 2 months we're down by about 5%. So folks, if I did not get to your request, make sure to leave a request in the comment section to this video after it posts. I will do my best to get to it, to inform you what Redfin's saying about how much home prices and home sales have gone down in your city. And as always, everyone, if you appreciate this video, make sure to smash the like button, make sure to share it, make sure to leave a comment and tell me, what you think. So until next time, everyone, this is Nick from Reventure Consulting signing off.